Get ready because the shipping industry is ripe for disruption. You're listening to Autonomous Ships Headquarters Podcast with your host, JP.
Welcome everybody to the Autonomous Ships Headquarters Podcast and our new episode after a break. I'm your host, Yara Baltic, or just JP, and today I have a very special guest for you. If you're into maritime autonomy and you haven't heard of Mr Ørnulf Jan Rødseth, then you are most likely doing something wrong. If you have, well, then good for you. Either way, you should listen to this episode because he's one of the most worldwide recognized experts in maritime autonomy. With more than 35 years of experience under his belt in the cutting-edge maritime projects, he has been involved in the area of maritime autonomy from its early beginnings. At the moment, he's working at one of the most recognized European research institutes called Sintef as a senior scientist. Through this role, he's involved in Europe's biggest and most important maritime autonomy project called Autoship. He's also the founder and the managing director of the Norwegian Forum for Autonomous Ships, and he's also maintaining the world's biggest LinkedIn group on this topic. One more thing before we begin. This episode has been recorded before Yara Birkeland project was put on hold, so please take that into account while listening. Without further ado, please meet Mr. Ørnulf Jan Rødseth. Hello Ørnulf, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So let's start with a little bit your personal background about your career, your motivation and inspiration. So who is Ørnulf and what do you do?
Oh, good question. Who knows? I graduated as computer constructor, actually, in '83. But I mostly worked with control systems, network technology, integrated control, and stuff like that. Originally medical equipment, then into maritime, and now recently into autonomous and automated smart shipping. So I would say I'm an engineer by heart and soul. It's an interesting area.
Why did you choose to go for maritime industry? What was your interest in this?
Actually, my father was a ship engineer, constructor, but I started with electronics and computer science. So I also started my work with medical electronics and stuff like that. But for some reason, I kind of entered into the maritime area, first with integrated ship control, stuff like that, but now also on autonomous ships. So I'm not quite sure, actually. It may be genes or something like that.
You worked in marine tech for 13 years. Could you tell us more about your involvement there and what was actually Marintech doing in this area?
I've mostly worked in research institutes, independent research institutes. Marintech used to be part of the Sintef group. It's still part of the Sintef group, but now it's Sintef Ocean. Changed names in 2017, about 3 years ago. We are a multidisciplinary research institute. We are doing quite a lot on hydrodynamics with big laboratories, also numeric analysis, stuff like that, construction. In 2017, we were merged with the aquaculture department, so we are also doing stuff in that area, and a lot of other things. So Sintef Ocean is quite an appropriate name because we work with the ocean, basically. My work is mostly on ship operations, not construction and stuff like that, not steel, not water, but operating the ships, exchanging information between ship and shore, automated bridge operations, integrating control systems, and so on.
Okay, so these are all research and development activities that Sintef Ocean performs.
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, we cannot do everything, but I would say we have most of our, or my group, I'm talking about my group now, mostly on infrastructure, networks, protocols, stuff like that. But we also have a quite big activity on logistics, planning and optimization and things like that.
Uh-huh. So your clients are from both the commercial business side, but also on the authority side, on the regulatory.
Yeah, you can say that. We are an independent research institute, earning most of our income from contract research, but that includes also EU projects, national research projects, as well as commercial contracts.
Okay, very interesting. And what are your main activities and responsibilities within? What does your actual day look like, for example?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It varies, I would say, but basically, I'm kind of coordinating some of the activities on what we call smart shipping and autonomous ships. A kind of long-term expert in the area. Mm-hmm. I do some project management and stuff like that, but mostly I leave that to others. So I'm the technical guy, the scientist, so to speak.
Mostly involved in this technical side of
of research. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. And one of other things that you also do is you're a manager of a Norwegian Forum for Autonomous Ships, or NFAS. Could you tell us a bit more what is the forum about, and what was the actual motivation behind starting it?
Yeah, that's also a good history. And originally, when it was started, I think, I don't quite recall, but 4 years ago, it was more to collect all the interested parties and discuss together and share information and stuff like that. As time evolves, we see that it's not, autonomous ships is not an established technology as such, but there's a lot of knowledge about this subject in Norway. So I would say we are gradually moving towards being a kind of face internationally for Norwegian research and developments in the area of autonomous ships, both for the authorities and for the industry and for the whole maritime cluster in Norway, as well as trying to find out what's going on in other places of the world, getting information back to Norway, exchanging information with others, establishing cooperation and stuff like that. So again, we try to keep it as a very independent organization, not kind of favorizing any particular aspect, but being more a kind of network operation, connecting Norway also to the international community.
And what are who are your members? Are there big corporations, companies, individuals?
It's mostly organizations. So we have big companies like ABB and Kongsberg. We have smaller companies like Maritime Robotics. We have the flag state authorities, the coastal authorities, insurance, ship owners, a very wide range of members. Different sizes, different occupations.
And what do you do? What are the actual activities of members? Do you have conferences? You publish some documentation, publications?
Yeah, we have done that and we will do that. But currently we are trying to channel most of the publications through the international channels, for instance, the International Organization for Standardization. So through NFAS, we are participating in work in ISO to develop terminology for autonomous ships. We are looking at ICT standards and stuff like that. But instead of making our own documents, we are trying to go through the national standards organizations.
I get
in
it.
Addition, yeah.
So in addition to influence them and to bring them like a connection with the expertise and the domain.
Yeah, exactly. And also, an important point here is that autonomous ships will require standards. For instance, you have to have standardized interfaces between the autonomous ships and the remote control. Otherwise, if you buy an autonomous ship, you will be stuck with whoever developed the system. I think it's an area which is much more dependent on international standards than people most kind of recognize.
I'm really glad you brought up this topic, because this is one of the questions I'd like to ask you. How far are we, and what is the actual state of standardization when it comes to these novel technologies such as unmanned or partially unmanned applications in the maritime?
Not very far. I mean, the concrete projects we have today, it's basically, if you look at merchant ships, it's only one, it's Yara Birkeland, which have a contract. But there are two more now being developed as demonstration scenarios, one inland waterways case and one short sea here in Norway. And we also have some other contracts that are being negotiated. But all these projects are one-off, and they're quite expensive, because you have to do everything from scratch. So this is one of the points that we really need to get more standardized solution here. And so far, we have started the work on standards, and we have kind of more or less identified the areas where we need standards. But it will take several years before we see results from this work. It's only in the start phase, actually.
Okay.
I mean, a case as an example is that we start the standardization work with terminology, because even the terminology is not generally agreed on.
Yeah, it's always the best way to start with some terms and definitions, and then once everybody agrees on the language, then you may proceed.
Which is tricky enough.
Is there, I mean, this standardization does not only need to affect technologies and protocols that we're going to use, but also a larger picture of the whole logistical chain, right? Because a lot of people, when I speak with them, or when they think about this, they're just concentrated on the technology and the ship itself. But if we look at the larger aspect of what this actually entails, it's much broader. How does these standardizations and talks now on higher levels that you're part of look at the big picture?
Well, my first comment to that is that you are quite absolutely correct. It's really the key factor in autonomous ships, because autonomous ships is a kind of means. It's not a solution in itself. You have to use it for something. And the cases we see now, at least the new cases that are developing, is, for instance, that it may be useful to scale ship sizes down in many cases to get a more flexible transport system with higher frequencies on departures, more differentiated speeds, going to smaller ports and stuff like that. And to do that, you have to overcome the problem of very high crew costs if you have to crew up all these small ships. So this is one very interesting area for autonomous and unmanned ships, or low manning ships. And this is a totally new logistics system, very different from typical ship systems today. So you are very right that this is actually what we have to look at. How can we develop a better maritime transport system by utilizing these different technologies? And smarter ships, automated cargo handling, 24/7 operation is important, but also the possibility of having smaller ships with reduced, or in some cases without crew.
So it's, for me, it's interesting to get into the thinking framework. How should we think about the use cases, the business cases? So what I see now is that, like, do you take the state of the art of the technology? So you look at where technology is today, and then you try to find a business cases and the way in which logistical chains need to be transformed to fit those technologies in. And that's how you come up with a couple of different cases, when then you evaluate, is there any actual, not necessarily profit, but is there any value coming out of it? How do I say it? You know what I mean?
Yes, I think I understand what you are talking about. We started this with the Moonin project in 2012, and that was a very technology-oriented project. the use case was a tramp bulker, basically, a dry bulker, and with retrofit and some other stuff. And what we found out in that project was that we really had a lot of the technology to do this, but the business case for that particular ship was not the best for various reasons. So I would say that the Muni project brought us the ideas and the means of using existing technology to implement these more or less autonomous ships, automated ships. And that brought us to the next step, which was looking at, okay, what can we use this for? What kind of new logistics systems can we develop using this new idea of highly automated and partly unmanned ships? And I would argue that the Yara Birkeland, for instance, is an example of that. Because we'll see when it sails unmanned in a couple of years, but basically the underlying idea there is that you want a fully automated electric ship transport system to replace about 40,000 truckloads a year. And for various reasons, you want to make it unmanned to keep the costs down and to keep it operating 24/7 and stuff like that. So Yara Birkeland is very dependent on the correct technology, but it was the logistics model, I think, that drove it.
Logistic model was the starting point, and then Yara Birkeland was the result of that optimizations that were made.
I would say it's an interaction, because you have to know that this is possible, and you have this new technology which can enable you to construct a transport chain differently. And if you know that, then you can look at your logistics. But the logistics is where the money is made, of course. So that's the key factor.
How does this project towards current vessels? Because now we're talking about building new logistics chains, and so we're building ports. We're building short sea inland vessels specifically made for these new purposes. How about retrofitting older vessels? How do they fall into this picture?
I think it depends a bit on the type of traffic. And retrofitting may be possible, but at least if you talk about unmanned ships, if you're interested in that, the point of unmanned ships is that if you don't have crew on board, you can take away the hotel section, which is a big power consumption, and it also takes a lot of space. You can remove a lot of the safety equipment that you need for the crew. And you can design the ship differently, you can operate it differently and stuff like that. And you don't get those gains by retrofitting old ships. And at least some of the analysis we have done indicates that you really have to look at this cost reduction by removing the accommodation as a big part of the economical calculation behind the new system, transport system. So retrofit for unmanned operation is, I don't think, so relevant. But of course, if you get more automation, automated cargo handling, automated berthing, automated mooring and all that stuff, that can also more or less easily be used by conventional ships.
Okay.
So I think smart
also maybe in navigation or situational awareness around the system, around the ship.
Yes, but then you will probably, I would guess that you use it for operator assistance, and for instance reducing to one shift crew, for instance, something like that. Mm-hmm. Because if you have automated navigation, you might argue that you don't have to have two watches, because the automation system can handle it and call the operator during nighttime, for instance, if things get really troublesome, something like that. So it might be useful for reducing slightly the crew. But mostly I think to make operations safer, because crew can get more rest. They don't have to stand 6 hours watches, 6 for instance, or 4. So you can use it to get a better working environment on conventional ships also, and a slight crew reduction. Mm-hmm. I don't think you will get a massive.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Yara Birkeland. Are there any other innovative projects that people should follow? What's on your list of developments that are the most important?
Well, I would say if you go to Belgium and look at Blue Line Logistics, inland waterways, they have a concept they call Zulu, which is a one-manned barge. And they are planning to make it unmanned, given that the waterway authorities will allow it. But they are quite positive. So the hope is that we will be able to do that. And that's a very interesting concept, because they are using some of the ideas I mentioned, that they want to go to smaller ports, cheaper ports, more direct, smaller ships, more flexible transport systems, and so on. So it's at least the ideas that Blue Line has is quite interesting, I think, for inland waterways. Mm-hmm. And just to get back to COVID, as they're operating one-man barges, they don't have a problem with this social distancing. It's one man anyway.
It can be a lonely place to be alone on a ship for prolonged periods of time, but...
No, inland is quite nice, because they change the person each 8 hours, I think.
Ah, okay.
So so they have quite nice working conditions, I think. It's a relatively short distances.
But very interesting use case, indeed.
Yes, it's really interesting, and I really like it. And we also have a case in Norway, which is not completed or contractually completed yet. But that's a supply chain between two warehouses operated by a retail distributor in Norway called ASKO. And they want to go to fully green transport with electric trucks. But this transport is between two places on each side of the Oslofjord. And they are mostly dependent on using a subsea tunnel. And the inclination when they want to go up again is quite steep. So they use a lot of energy. So they have found out that it might be better to operate their own electric ferry for these trucks, which is another example of new types of, call it business models, where driving force is nullifying emissions, basically.
Mm-hmm. I see. I've seen this term popping up quite frequently. This road to water initiative or motorway of the sea. But can really inland and short sea compete with transport by trucks?
It's interesting. Not in all cases, but what we think, and we have done some analysis on it, is that the main problem with ships is transshipment cost, because you typically have to take cargo on trucks to the ship. The ship goes to the next port, and then you have to load it onto a truck to get it to the final destination. But there are two issues here. If you can have ships going to smaller ports, again, you need smaller ships. Then you can reduce or eliminate this final truck transport, because a lot of the industry is actually on the water side, which is also the case on inland waterways, by the way.
Okay. So we still need to look at per use case, per specific purpose. It's not like we can make a blanket statement that it will directly compete with trucks, but we need to look at individual cases and evaluate.
Yeah, you have when you compare ships to trucks, you have a very big problem in various...
Exactly. That's my motivation behind this question.
Yeah. And it has to do with the truck owner is typically handling the cargo themselves with the driver. So you don't have any extra cost for renting cranes and stuff like that. So it's a very difficult competition, actually. But what we see is that if you can have smaller ships going more directly, if you can automate cargo handling so that you don't have to pay extra for the crane or this cargo truck, then it's an interesting picture that opens up. And when we see cases actually here in Trondheim and other places along the coast where this might be possible. And we've done some calculations and it seems to make sense.
All right, that's a nice win in the back for these developments. And of course the necessary one, because without this we're all in the dreams and wishful thinking space. Do you see more of these? I mean, you mentioned a couple of times the term flexible logistics, and so you see the trajectory towards smaller vessels, smaller, more automated ports.
Yes, I think, this is stretching it, but if you look at container ships today with 20,000 TEUs on board, from a logistics point of view, it's a nightmare. You need extremely expensive port facilities to handle the ships. It's a big stress on the infrastructure, particularly if you want to take the cargo out of the port and into the hinterland. I saw some statistics from European ports where that was an 18,000 TEU ship going into one specific terminal. And the mean number of containers moved, loaded and unloaded from a ship during one call was about 2,000, 3,000 of 80,000 capacity. So I think it's reason to ask whether this is both sustainable and an efficient logistics system.
But we came to this point with exactly the analysis of efficiency, of spreading the transport costs on more and more units.
Yeah, but that makes sense from the point of view of the ship owner. Because if you buy a ship transport as ship transport and nothing else, you want to have it as cheap as possible, and then the bigger ship makes it more competitive. But if you look at the logistics chain from user to consumer, most of the cost is not the ship cost. It's the hinterland transport and transshipment costs in port. So I think the general sum is about $100 for lifting one container one time. While I think the rate from US to Europe in the start of last year, 2019, was around $1,000. That was extremely cheap, but still. So it illustrates that the ship cost is a relatively small part of the shipping cost if you look at it from the end user's perspective. And if you can get a more flexible system with higher frequencies, stuff like that, you may be able to fill the ship more. You can also differentiate speed. A problem today is that most of the container ships, they have reduced speed, so they are losing cargo. They are losing the high value cargo to air freight, actually.
Yeah.
So, but then again, I haven't done any analysis on this, but I think it's actually a good case to really have a look at whether these big container ships is the best way to implement a good logistics system.
It's a very interesting perspective that you made there, with quite huge implications in the future when all of these current use cases are being reevaluated, and who knows what kind of new decisions and new conclusions can be drawn from these things that what you're talking about the smaller and flexible way of handling cargo.
Yeah. I think. I don't know really if this makes sense as a use case, but it illustrates, I think, the possibilities that this new type of autonomous ship technology opens.
It's also new business models that can be opened up from there, right?
Yes, exactly, and not the least new operators, new businesses actually getting into it. And it's very interesting if you look at the two cases we know of here in Norway, which is ASKO and Yara. The initiators of this operation and those who are taking the lead on building the ships is not ship owners, it's logistics chain owners.
Exactly. That's why I had troubles understanding how Yara Birkeland came into picture, but when I researched, it was basically an initiative from the fertilizer manufacturer, correct?
Yes, and we see examples of that, which I cannot tell you about, but typically it's, I think actually this environmental focus on CO2 emissions is a much stronger driver than most people realize. So from Yara's perspective, I would claim that a driving force is partly to get rid of the trucks in a highly populated area, but also to get a fully green transport chain. And we see this from others also, that they sell relatively expensive materials to the continent or internationally, and the customers are more and more asking for green, both production and transport. So this may also be a game changer. I think that you really have to look at zero emission, basically, ships. And ships is very nice because they don't produce a lot of noise, which is an increasing problem in many areas, also here in Norway, from the trucks. They don't need a lot of parking space, and they don't need expensive infrastructure, particularly if you build them smaller. So there is a lot of developments in this area, which is kind of triggered by these ideas that you can build smaller ships, they can be more flexible and so on, and it changes the picture quite dramatically, I would say.
I completely agree with you, and one of the next things I'd like to ask you is about Autoship. It's the project funded by European Union, by Horizon 2020, and it perfectly circumvents, I think, these things that you were just mentioning about CO2 reducing of emissions, and but I'd like to hear from you, what is this project about, and how are you involved in this?
We can take the project first. I think Autoship is a demonstrator project. It's not so much research as demonstration. And I would say, from my point of view, the biggest value of Autoship is that it will demonstrate autonomous operation by a short sea ship and an inland waterway vessel. And by that, adding to the experience we have, the concrete experience in operating and developing autonomous ships. Because today we only have one project, which is Yara. So, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here, but most of those who are interested in the possibilities, they see the risk because we don't have enough experience. So the risk is actually too high to invest now. But once Autoship is able to demonstrate on 2 more ships, you will substantially reduce this risk, I think. So beyond the actual demonstration and the technology development, I really think that the demonstration of autonomous operation, real autonomous operation of 2 ships, is a very big issue in Autoship.
Mm-hmm. Could be an inflection point for adoption of these novel technologies.
It will not necessarily be the only, but it will be, in my head, it will be a very important contribution, because what we are lacking now is not technology, I think. It's mostly demonstrations that this is feasible, including that the authorities accept the safety analysis and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to this project, and we have less than 3 years.
Could you tell us more about the details? What is the project trying to actually demonstrate?
Yeah, one of the cases is inland waterways, and it's Blue Line logistics again, with the concept of smaller unmanned ships, or vessels in this case, I should say, operating in Belgium, and I also think maybe Dutch areas. And Blue Line they have already started to try to sell this idea to France and Germany and stuff like that. So I think it's a very interesting concept. And that will sail unmanned through the waterways. We have to solve the problem of lock passing and bridges, remotely controlled bridges and all that stuff. The cargo handling is mostly manual because it's a kind of dumpster case, which is picked up directly by the trucks. So that's not a big problem. The other case is actually a fish feed or a bulk carrier along the Norwegian coast. Not a very big one, but I don't recall. I think it's between 1,000 and 2,000 tons, but fairly big. And it will also go down to Denmark to demonstrate also compliance with the Danish and Norwegian authorities as a short sea ship. And that's a full-fledged seagoing short sea ship.
And it's interesting that it's going to cross authorities. So
yes.
We've seen so far just a regional and within one state or one authority operations, but this is like the first one where we're going to do international trade.
Yes, and that's true. I think actually there is an initiative between Belgium and the UK where they are trying to raise money to set up an unmanned container line across the channel. But that's just a concept. So this project will probably be the first to demonstrate international or regional, I would say, traffic. And we probably also have to involve the Swedish authorities because it's passing through Swedish territorial waters.
Mm-hmm. And
so that
the Autoship project is not only focused, as understood, on technology, on these key enabling technologies, but also on the bigger picture, on the economic, business, logistical impacts.
Yeah.
Right?
That I would say that's not. It's not determining the outcome of the project, but the project will actually develop methods for cost-benefit analysis, societal effect analysis, and stuff like that, also to document the benefits. I wouldn't say that the short sea case it's interesting, but it's not the best case for unmanned shipping because it's a lot of cargo handling and other stuff. But the demonstration is extremely important, as you say, both with respect to developing and demonstrating the technology, but also showing that it can get international acceptance for the safety levels of this technology.
Yeah.
But the inland case is actually more interesting from a logistics perspective, for that's also developing, I wouldn't say new types, but it opens up for new types of transport systems. Both the demonstration cases are existing transport systems, actually. Mm-hmm. But the project will absolutely emphasize this cost-benefit and trying to also prove that both the societal and economic benefit of this type of technology.
All right. We hope it will pave the way for the future business investments and for the future applications that these great developments can bring to us. And we'll live to see. It's not that far away. When is this project? How long does it last, actually?
I think it's. I have to check, but it's 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. And in 1st of June we have. Finished the first year, so it's about 2.5 years until finish.
All right.
From now, a bit more.
And what is Sintef? Sintef Ocean is also part of this
yes.
project from the Norwegian side, as well as Kongsberg Group. What is your part of the work scope?
Our role is partly to take whatever experiences we get from this project into the international standards domain. And that applies both to ICT solutions, technical solutions, transport system design, and also cost-benefit analysis and stuff like that. And also to develop this to a level where it can be used in a more general sense. So I would say that our role is, together with Strathclyde University and some others, to generalize the very specific things we are doing in Autoship to make it suitable for creating the next autonomous ship transport system.
We're looking forward to this.
We are also.
So to wrap it up, could you please tell us where can people get information from you? Where can they find more information about the things that we talked about?
Yeah, again, coming back to NFAS and our international network, we maintain a couple of web pages that you probably know of.
We'll put links in the show notes.
Exactly. And I also maintain a LinkedIn group called Autonomous Ships NFAS or something like that. So what I do is mostly copy stuff that is interesting in relationship to autonomous ships into this group. So if you're interested in that, you may want to follow that one.
I fully support, and I'm one of the followers there, and it was a great source of information for me as well, and for many others. So we'll put all the links in the show notes. Hopefully you get more and more followings. And that's it for today. I want to really thank you, Ørnulf, for this opportunity. It was an amazing talk. You shared really precious information and from your expert perspective. So thanks again for this.
Yeah, thank you for having me and listening patiently to all this talk about autonomous ships. Thank you.
Thank you, Ørnulf.
Okay, bye-bye.
That was all for today's episode. I hope you gained a lot of useful insights from Ørnulf. Perhaps a good takeaway would be that it's not only about technology, but instead we need to understand the big picture and understand root causes of problems that technology will help us solve. Please check Norwegian Forum for Autonomous Ships, nfas.autonomous-ship.org, and LinkedIn group Autonomous Ships NFAS. Both links will be in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @AutonomousShips. You will also find us on Spotify, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If you like this episode, please share. If you have any comments, feel free to send us an email. And that's it. Until next time, my friends, take care. Oi oi.